Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? A drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Sarah Ward. Sarah is a mother of twins and a singleton who all experienced time in the NICU before coming home to thrive. She received a BS in public health and behavior from the University of Georgia and a degree in dental hygiene from Medical College of Georgia. She enjoys all things music, being outdoors, and spending time with family and friends. Sarah is the author of Our NICU Journey and One Step Behind, with a third title being released soon. As an advocate for families of premature birth and early literacy, Sarah hopes to support families on their own NICU journey and encourage reading to children with her Reading Through the NICU program. You can find more information about this program and her books on her website, littlewardbooks.com, or find her on social media by searching for Reading Through the NICU. Her favorite quote is by Irma Bombeck. When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left and could say I used everything you gave me. I love that. That is one of my favorite quotes. Sarah and I became friends on Instagram a while back, and she had been on the show before, season 2, episode 11, Finding Gratitude in the NICU. And we really have remained friends and kind of continued to encourage one another. And with new things coming out and seeing her really walk in the calling God has for her, I asked her if she would come back on. So welcome, Sarah. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Amanda. It's so good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You're one of the most down-to-earth, cheerful, legitimately joyful people that I have met. And even though you have been through quite a lot, I see you using it all for good and to bridge to other people who maybe don't yet know the hope of knowing Jesus in those difficult times. And I really admire that.
Well, thank you, and likewise.
Well, thank you. I try. I am such a lucky girl. Yes, I said it, girl. It doesn't matter how old you are. I'm not a woman. I'm a girl and inside. And I'm such a lucky girl that I get to meet so many amazing, encouraging people. And then I get to get encouraged every single week. I have a new story that I'm working on and all these other stories in the background. And I really feel like God uses it to help me when maybe sometimes it's difficult in the season caring for my parents. It keeps me focused on him.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you've been doing. And I love, seeing your updates and all the people that you've connected with. You've shared so many just incredible stories that wouldn't happen without God. So I'm just thankful to know you. You're so cool.
Oh. Right back at you. Well, you can tell that we're definitely besties, and I'm so excited to have you back on. Now, I know we've already gone through this once, but I think every time you share your story, it's going to be unique because you're coming from a new place. You've grown since the last time you shared it, or you have new things going on, or God is doing something new. So I'm going to still do this interview the way that we did the first one and start at the beginning. I think it's so awesome to see how God works in our lives like that from the very beginning. So would you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure. I thankfully grew up a very happy, healthy child. I grew up in the South, still in the South, and it is very hot today. So I had two very present parents. my dad worked hard to provide for us, and my mom stayed home with us for a while, and we were always playing games and doing crafts and just having a good time. And then she kind of followed us into school and worked in the school with us to, keep an eye on us to make sure we were behaving and taken care of. And I really admire that about her, having my own children now and following in her footsteps. It is a sacrifice that I have realized that it is. And, I really appreciate her for doing that. But I also have two older, supportive, and slightly protective brothers who are, they're brothers, but they really are the best. They're always encouraging, and I love them to death. And we all grew up in the church. We were active participants, and thankfully, I grew up having a relationship with God, and that was a priority for our parents to make sure that, we were involved in the church. We, knew that God loved us, and I think we had talked about this before, but our church had split when we were growing up, and it was an eye-opening experience for children to see church members not getting along so great and not being able to work certain things out. But thankfully, we were able to start a new church, and that gave one of my brothers and I an opportunity to help build up the youth, which I think probably had a huge impact on me on, learning leadership skills and just kind of building my own faith in God.
Yeah, that's one of those times where what the enemy meant for evil, God worked to good, right? I do think it's important too that you did see that people are people. Every single one of us needs Jesus, even people that are already Christians. I think there's so many habits and so many ways of thinking that haven't yet been transformed, dependent on the person and how close of a relationship they have with Jesus. And it's funny, I just shared this morning a little bit about something God was showing me in his word. I was reading about Lazarus and how, Jesus goes, he's already been dead for 4 days. Jesus goes and he tells him to come out. He comes out and he's in his grave clothes, right? And then he says, he gives a command to all the people who were weeping when he was dead, all the people who loved him, his community, right? He says, unbind him, loose him, and let him go. And what that means is, like, when you come out, right? So we get born again, right? That's Jesus says, come out of the grave. We come out of the grave, but there's still these things around us, these old ways of thinking and these old ways of being, these grave clothes, and we need the family in Christ around us to help us get out of that. And I actually looked up the grave clothes, right? So check this out. This is the coolest thing. When they wrapped them up in linen, they wrapped them in this big piece from the feet all the way up to their head, and then they poured these liquid spices in it. Those things hardened. It hardened. It became like a cocoon of all things,
like
right?
A mummy almost.
Yes. And it hardened. And so when he said, come out, he came out, but he couldn't get himself out of that. He needed to be cut out, set loose, set free.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that the coolest thing? So when he said, let him go, unwrap the grave clothes, loose him, that's the responsibility of the other people in Christ around you after you're born again. Isn't that the coolest thing?
That's really great imagery. I mean, that's I've never heard that, so that's pretty awesome.
I hadn't either. And I think it was God just showed me this command to the people. And then I started digging into, well, what were grave clothes, And I thought it was so cool they referred to it like a cocoon, because often when we talk about being transformed and having new life, we talk about a butterfly, right? So that cannot be, a coincidence.
That's really cool. I might have to borrow that one day.
Go ahead. It's just revelation from God. I share everything he shares with me like that because I think it gives us such encouragement. But I think also it's this wake up call to the people around us, when we come to Christ. Like, he did his part. I'm alive, right? I'm alive again. but there's a
Yeah.
part for us to do. And so as we're helping, whether it's our children or whether it's our parents come to Christ or whether it's friends or people in our church, as we're helping them loose those old things and get untied and unbound from those old ways, that transformation, they can't do it all themselves.
Right. It takes a village for sure.
It does, which is really appropriate with you because you needed a village too. And it's really weird. I had no intent on talking about this, but it was just the timing. I love how God puts these things together. Now, I love how you and your brother really learned the good and the bad. You learned how to serve. You learned what leadership was like. What happened with that faith and those things that you learned by the time that you got to college? That changes for a lot of people at that point.
Yes, college is, a growing experience for all of us. So I had gone off to college to the University of Georgia, and I was super active. I did the marching band, which is huge there. I mean, they're two-time national champions now. Just throwing that in there for all my
Wow.
fans. Let's go for 3 and 23, right? So
Right.
I spent a lot of time doing that, and I had a full course load, and my brother introduced me to our campus ministry, which was amazing. He was part of the praise band. And so, of course, I joined the praise band and got involved in doing creative groups. So we would, make skits and videos each week to kind of go along with the lessons. And then I
Mm-hmm.
joined their leadership. So I was all in. I was
Mm-hmm.
there all the time, doing all the things, and I probably had a little trouble saying no. I'm that
Mm.
person that when someone asks, I'm like, sure, I can help you with that. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I've got all these other commitments. So, as the years went on, I had taken a second job working at a physical therapy office, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do and be in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I had also, part of my curriculum was to volunteer. So I had volunteered at the American Cancer Society and the Red Cross, and I worked at a hospital in employee health. So there's only so much time
I'm
in a
getting
day.
tired. I'm
I,
getting tired just listening to how many things you were doing. That's a
it was a
lot.
lot.
That's a lot.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, and on top of that, like trying to have a social life,
Mm-hmm.
it's exhausting. It was fun. I loved it in the moment.
Yeah.
Um, but it's it's it gets tiring, and
Yeah.
I think I just got burnout. I just could not do it anymore. I mean, I did it throughout all of college, and when I left college, um, I I went back to school to get my dental hygiene degree, and I just needed a break. I mean, I would still go to church on Sunday, but I was not as involved as I used to be. And I think part of that too is just trying to figure out, your space, which I think a lot of other young adults struggle with this.
Yeah.
Like in
Yeah.
between college, you have this very active
Mm-hmm.
campus life ministry group to go to, and you're always socializing and doing things. And you're not quite to that. I'm a parent. I got to make sure my kids are always going to church. So you're trying to find this balance of being a young adult and trying to be involved, and a lot of churches don't have programs for that in between.
Yeah.
And so I think I kind of just took a break, and it was a necessary break, but it also it was a little sad. It was sad not to be involved as much as I used to be.
And what I'm hearing also is you went from doing all this ministry kind of in the church or ministry for others where you were serving and leading. And now God has given you the ministry he has for you to do outside of the church, your calling. And I think a lot of times what happens is we are excited that we know Jesus and we do want to pour into others. But I think sometimes people who tend to say yes or who are doers or creatives do get burnt out because we're doing other people's ministry, and God has one for each one of us, right? And I think it can be at church, but sometimes it's not. Like none of my ministry, I do women's ministry and I'm part of, different things, but my main ministry has never been in church.
That's amazing because you're kind of, you're blazing your own trail here. You're really making a way that wasn't a way before. And I think that's just so cool.
But you're doing something amazing too. And that's what I'm saying. God has given each one of us, like you have a very specific group of people because of what you went through that you minister to. And it's because after you made your way through, you wanted to pour back into the community that came around you. And God is using that and continuing to grow your ministry. And it's not that you can't do ministry at church, but He has one for people, not necessarily just in your church. And He has a lot of plans for it. That's why you're back on again.
Well, it's so exciting. It's so exciting to look back. So when you had called me and asked to do this again, I kind of just did like a bit of a reflection and, kind of thinking, wow, before when I was on here, I hadn't even released the book yet. And now it's been out for almost 2 years. And I'm like, look, how much has changed? And then, trying to look back at, where it all started from and the education that I had gotten that I wasn't really sure how I was going to use it and the people that I had met and the experience I had gone through. I'm just now seeing the puzzle pieces starting to come together, and it's so cool.
It is. He doesn't waste a thing. God uses every darn thing. And you look back and you're like, wow, that's amazing. And so it's one of the reasons I do like to have people back on sometimes, because I see God continuing to grow their ministry and take them in new directions and have them come up with new things for new people. And I saw that in you. And I wanted you to be able to see too what God's doing, because sometimes your own story is an encouragement.
Well, I appreciate that because I honestly did not even, I didn't even think about it. And then, doing this and reflecting on it, I was like, I am doing okay.
Yes, you are more than okay. You're walking in your calling. And you know what? There's nothing like that. And there's nobody else that has been given to do exactly what you've been given to do. And the thing I always remind people, if you're still sitting down and you're still feeling like you can't do it or you don't know how, but you know what God has for you, please stand up and do it, because the world is missing out on something that God planned to give the world. Yeah. It's important.
That's so true. And I always think that. So one of my girls, she loves to sing like me. She's a I'm gonna sing it and I don't care who's listening kind of person. And she absolutely adores that Big Daddy Weave's God is in this story. Mm-hmm. And we sing it all the time. And every time I hear her little voice singing it, Aww. That's all I can say. I was like, God is in this story. And like, you're the reason why mommy's doing all of this extra work that she does not have to do. But just hearing her, singing that, I'm like, you know what? She's got a point. It's a beautiful song. And, you have to go through not great things to get to the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I can kind of picture it. That's beautiful. Now tell us, I love this story actually. How did you meet your husband?
My husband, he cringes every time I talk about this. So I met my husband in high school. We were both in the band together. We both played trumpet. And one day, his mother came up to me and said, hey, I heard you were giving lessons. Do you mind giving my son trumpet lessons? And I said, okay. And so I did. We were friendly, but we didn't think anything of it. And so I'm a year ahead of him in school. So I went off to college, and the next year he came to UGA as well, and he didn't know a whole lot of people, and so his mom said, hey, Sarah goes here, I still have her phone number, let me call her up, and that way somebody, she can show you around. So he called, and then he called, and I said, okay, let's introduce you to some other people. And so I, took him to our campus ministry and tried to introduce him to as many people as I knew possible. So he would make lots of friends, and he kept on calling. I give him a lot of credit. The kid was very determined. So he wore me down, and we eventually went on our first date. And it was great. We had a good time, and we just kept going from there. He was my first boyfriend and my last boyfriend. It's kind of cool.
Oh, that is cool. And you know what? Tenacity is a good characteristic to find in
It
a husband.
is. I see it in my children now. I'm like, you got that from your daddy.
That's awesome. Now, y'all did get married and you eventually became pregnant with twins, which in itself must be quite the experience. Like, what was that time like for you?
Yes. So we had been married for a while. I mean, I think we were going on 5 years, and we thought we had our time. Now it's time. We did everything right. We waited. Um, let let's have some kids. And I found out, it wasn't as easy as I thought it was supposed to be.
Hmm.
So it took a while for us to get pregnant, but once we did, I was so excited, and super scared to find out we were having twins. My husband was so proud of himself. He's like, "Yes, this is amazing." And it runs in our family. So my mom had been saying for years, like, somebody's gonna get it. I don't know who it's gonna be, and I was that lucky one. So I got pregnant with twins, and the pregnancy was terrible. It
Mm.
I had morning sickness the entire time. I had
Oh,
two different medications that they put me on that still did not completely take the nausea away, which was very difficult as a dental hygienist working in people's mouths all day.
oh,
It gets kind of gross. And so I had a few moments where I had to run down the hallway and just kind of throw up. But it's the sacrifices mothers make, right?
hmm.
So thankfully, things went pretty well outside of having awful symptoms of pregnancy, um, until things kind of went not great very quickly. So we ended up, I had severe back pain one day at work, and I kind of just shrugged it off like, oh, I pulled my back. And I'll never forget my boss was awesome. She was a retired nurse,
Hmm.
and she went into dentistry to take over her father's practice. And she said, back pain sometimes leads to babies, so be careful. And I didn't think anything of it. And the next morning I woke up and had some bleeding, and my husband's like, we need to go to the doctor. And I kind of
Yeah.
shrugged it off and said, no, we're fine. I'm fine. I just need to rest. And he's like, no, we're going to the doctor. So he drove me there. The clinic hadn't opened yet. Um, and so we walked in and kind of said, things aren't great. I don't know what's going on. And they just kind of looked at us like, okay. So they hooked us up to the monitors, and kind of, we're trying to find the baby's heartbeats, and everything was just kind of slow.
Mm.
And it didn't seem like it was a big deal. I kind of felt silly for being there. Um, and we had people come in, and they're like, well, you're kind of starting to dilate a little bit. So we're going to get you settled in on a room and just get you to rest, and we'll keep those babies in there for as long as we can. And I said, oh, okay. And so they had wheeled me down to a different room to stay for inpatient. And the doctor came in and checked again. And he said, oh, you're starting to dilate. Like, this is becoming an
Oh,
issue.
wow.
He said, we need to get someone in here to slow this down so they don't come. You might be having them in the next few days or the next week. So let's try to slow this down. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And probably 2 minutes later, they came to check again. They're like, no, these babies are coming. We lost the heartbeat. So it got scary very quick. And
I
the amount of
bet.
time it took for us to go to a different room is when everything went south. So thankfully, God, gave my husband the push to say, "You're wrong, and we're going to the hospital anyways," because I'm stubborn and I just kind of shrugged it off. I'm fine. We're fine. I think that's a mom thing. We're just like, we're good. We'll just keep going. But I wasn't, and so I'm so glad he was there to take care of me. But so they pretty much said, we got to go to the emergency room right now. And my
Mm,
husband turned green. I've never seen a human turn green before, but he literally turned green. He's like, I
wow.
gotta go make a phone call. And I said, you gotta what? He's like, I gotta go. And he stepped out, and I was like, seriously? So he went and called our families to let them know what was going on. Everyone
Yeah.
thought he was, joking. And he's like, I don't know why I would joke about this.
Yeah.
And when they realized how serious it was, it was
How
so
many
cool.
weeks? How many weeks were you when this was
So I was
happening?
20, I was 28 weeks. So I had
Wow.
just started my third trimester. So we did not get a third trimester,
Wow.
which is not great, but it could have been worse. So
Yeah.
they wheeled us down to the emergency room and had an emergency C-section and found out we had two girls. We didn't even know the gender of them. So we had babies.
Wow. I mean, what was going through your mind? I know with my first child, I had a C-section after like 25 hours of labor. And
Wow.
so I remember them kind of putting me under, and I remember coming back to consciousness in the room about 3 a.m. No people, no nurses, no baby. It was not the experience I thought it was going to be. And I just remember ringing the bell, like, where's my baby? What is
That's
going on? And
terrifying.
so I can't even imagine what you were feeling. Like, what did it feel like? It's certainly
I
not what you were expecting.
No, I mean, it was kind of surreal. Like you look around and you see a team of people running around, grabbing things, sticking
Mm,
things in you, and you just look like, is this really happening? Like, am I
yeah.
dreaming right now? This is not how I expected this to go. And then seeing a little bit of panic in some of their eyes, I think was was the reality check. Like, oh, this is happening.
Hmm.
I will never forget getting into the emergency room, which is the brightest, whitest room I have ever been in. That is not like the movies. Not everything looks like the really
Yeah.
cool ER stories. It is a very sterile room, and I remember our anesthesiologist said, I have to put this really big needle in your back. Can you hold still so you don't get paralyzed? I said, what?
Oh.
you know, and so I kind of lost it after that. I just was like, I just this really you just start crying. And I was like,
Mm,
I don't want to be here. I'm sorry. And they're like, well, you don't really have a choice. So this
mm-mm.
is happening. Just hold still. And it was surreal to, you don't feel anything from, the chest down. So, watching them pick your body up and just move it around, you're like, this is
Yeah.
terrible. This is the worst day of my life.
I
And it
must have
was
been in
like I keep
shock.
telling people that, but my daughter's birth was probably the worst day of my life.
Hmm. You must have been in shock too.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Trying to register everything. I remember
Hmm.
a nurse sticking the IV in my arm, and then we realized I still had my watch on, and she's like, "Oh no!" So they got to rip the watch off. They had to rip the
Oh,
IV off. There's like blood everywhere, and then trying to
oh,
stick it back in. And I still have that watch, and I can't get the blood out of some of the nooks and crannies, so I just don't wear it anymore. But I'm just like, it's
mm.
it's it's very strange, and it was traumatic. It was a traumatic birth.
Yeah, I can hear
But I
that.
had two beautiful babies to account for it, so I can't say that it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, but there was trauma. I mean, I'm so grateful you have two beautiful babies who've turned into beautiful little young ladies, but that definitely was traumatic. And it sounds like something out of a movie. It just doesn't sound real.
Yeah, I agree, and I wish it was. And, so I mean, it was a little strange also, you see all the new moms and they put the babies on their chest and like you have
Mm-hmm.
your nice like golden
Mm-hmm.
hour with them, which is so beneficial for the baby. And we didn't even get that. They're like, oh, here's your baby. They're in that box right there. Do you see them? And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, oh, okay, well, they got to go to the NICU now. And then, they just take them away and you're like, bye.
Yeah.
And so my husband thankfully snapped a quick picture. So when we got back to our room, I could see it. But I mean, I didn't get to see them. And that was just, you don't hear them cry.
Yeah.
All of those normal, quote unquote, normal things that you're supposed to experience during their birth did not happen. It was not a normal experience. And then after the C-section, they stitch you up and they put you in a recovery room, which is what you woke up in, and you just sit
Mm-hmm.
there like, what just happened? Where is
Mm-hmm.
everybody? Why am I alone in this room and no one's
Yeah.
telling me what's going on?
The last thing I remember was seeing like kind of the face of the person who was putting me out and counting backwards. And then you wake up in this room and all the people that were out in the waiting room have gone home by this point. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And like, I don't even know, like, I didn't know what my uh, gender was going to be either, or a child. I didn't even know what I had. It was the craziest thing ever. It's like pushing the button, like, someone please bring me my baby. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally out of body experience. But I can't imagine the next part of your story, right? So I did get to take my baby home. I got to hold my baby. What was your NICU experience like? I can't imagine not being able to just immediately have your baby and go home.
Yeah, it really wasn't fun. I will give the nurses and staff at the University of Alabama in Birmingham a lot of credit because they advocate for you every step of the way. So
Hmm.
they actually wheeled my bed going from the recovery room to my patient room. We wheeled past the NICU and they're like, your baby's right there. I mean, you can't see anything, but at least the thought
Yeah.
was there. And I appreciated that so much. I'm like, hey, baby in a box, and so you go into your room and I think, you have that moment of just sitting there and you hear, the moms down the hall with their babies in their room and you're just sitting there having a little pity party to yourself, like, I'm here. I'm not
Yeah.
really sure what all just happened. And I don't have my baby in my room. They're way down the hall on a different floor. And I don't know what's happening to them right now. And
Yeah.
it was such a cold, numb, painful experience. And I'm so thankful to have a support uh, system with my husband, with our family. My coworkers came to see me. My boss, made sure she stopped
Hmm.
by. She's like, I think the babies were good. I asked the nurses about it. They said they were breathing, and I was like, well, thanks. I'm glad they're breathing. I guess that's all you can hope for at this point. So
Wow.
it was a very just like a cold experience. There was no happy, smiling, loving um, moment in that. And I will say I do appreciate now, but I did not appreciate in the moment being nurses. I mean, they came in and they're like, your baby's in the NICU. You got to start pumping. And I was like, I got to what? And they
Yeah.
said, this is our industrial grade breast pump. I'm going to show you how to work it. Your babies need every ounce that they can get. And I said, okay. So,
Yeah.
they showed me how to work it. My husband was like, what is that? Like, I don't want anything to do with this. So, and they really advocated on starting to pump as soon as possible because that first bit of milk that you get, the colostrum, is so beneficial to
Hmm.
premature babies. It
Yeah.
helps with like their brain development and other things. And so they're like, if they can get this, it's going to help their immune system. They're going to be able to fight off some nasty colds. It was February, so it was cold and flu season, RSV season, so all the
Hmm.
yucky bugs at the hospital were there, and so that became my new mission was to
Yeah.
pump. I was going to pump.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was not fun, and it was very cold. It's not like nursing your baby and having that sweet moment. It's just very mechanical.
Yeah, but you were able to do something. And I'm sure just knowing that you could contribute to their health and their well-being in some way, even though it wasn't exactly what you had pictured, probably did help you to kind of hold on. Now, one of my favorite things about the experience that you and your husband had with your kids is that your husband, in the same way he was tenacious in pursuing you, came up with a great idea, and that was he was going to read to his kids. So you can tell me a little bit about that because I just think it's so great. He like showed up with all of these books, and I don't know that that would have been my first thought.
He's such a cool guy. I'm so glad that I married him. um, so for my baby shower, which ironically was the weekend before I gave birth to my girls, we made
Oh
sure to
wow.
have our shower very early because I heard, they could be born early. So I was like,
Yeah.
let's not have any problems. Let's do our shower early. I had asked for people instead of bringing cards because cards are kind of expensive these days. I said, can you just find like some children's books to help build our kids' library?
Hmm.
And so we had an entire room full of just baby shower stuff in boxes and bags that we still had not even gone through yet. And so, we weren't planning on staying at the hospital when we had gone in early that morning. So my husband went home to get a few essentials, and he came back with like a bag full of these of these books. Probably because he looked in there and was like, I don't know what any of this stuff is, but I do know what these books are, and dang it, we're gonna read to them. So he grabbed those, and the very first time we went in to go see our girls in the NICU, he pulled out Nancy Tillman's "The Night You Were Born,"
Mm.
and he read it to them, and it was just the sweetest moment. And it was kind of cool because one of the NICU nurses had come in and she said, wow, I'm so glad to see you doing that because there's been all this research that says how beneficial reading to premature babies is. And they're like, this is going, like, if you keep this up, this is going to be great for them. And so that, pumping was kind of my mission. And
Hmm.
reading those books became his. But he's like, we're going to read all of these books. So every day he came in and he read to them. And it's one of my favorite NICU images that I have. I made sure that we put it in our book because
Yeah.
it's so heartwarming to see a dad sit there and reading to his kids. And that first week we weren't able to hold them. Um, so that was our way of helping them.
Yeah, it's so important in the same way that you had this thing that you could do, a tangible thing you could do to kind of pour in towards their well-being, so did he. And I think that's really important in a situation like that where you're kind of traumatized, things aren't going the way you thought they would. You can't even hold your children to be able to do something as a parent. Must have really just been life-giving to each of you.
Yeah, it definitely it helps because the whole experience is very cold. Um,
Hmm.
and you kind of just feel helpless. You don't know what to do. You're sitting there watching everyone else do stuff, and you're like,
Yeah.
what can I do to help? Like, just give me a job, and I will do it. And so, I definitely tell other NICU families who reach out and say, we just got to the NICU. What do we do? And I'm like, go ask what you are able to do. Can you change a diaper? Can you
Hmm.
wipe something down? Can you read a book? Can you, like, some babies are born so premature that you actually can't touch them because their skin is not developed enough.
Wow.
And it could, yeah, some situations are pretty hard. And so, them hearing your voice is just so beneficial, even if you're just talking or singing to them. But most people don't really want to bust out in song in the NICU when other people are watching. So reading's just such a cool way. It helps reduce stress, it increases neurological development, it helps soothe, and it really helps with bonding. You
Yeah.
don't get a chance to bond with your baby, and it makes you feel like you have a connection with them.
Yeah. And I love the connection between reading to your kids in the NICU and now providing books, as well as this really important information to parents who are new to the NICU, right? So you're not only giving them, books that they can read to their own kids, but you have become a wealth of information through what you've been through, because we're going to talk about your son next. And, you have spent a lot of time in the NICU. And so by sharing and overflowing the things that you learned with other people and pouring back into the community of people that are going through what you went through, you're really doing a lot of good things. And I'm sure that you'll never know how many lives you've touched.
Yeah, it's going in the NICU is such an isolating experience. You don't realize it until you're in the thick of it, and you're like, I need to go home and shower. I need to brush my teeth. Like, I have not
Yeah.
talked to people in weeks because you don't. I mean, your main focus is your baby, and you
Yeah.
can't bring other people in and out. You can't connect with others. You're in your own kind of little bubble,
Hmm.
and I think people really need connections to get through that. You need other people. You need your tribe to get you through those hard times. And because you're in this isolated, very sterile environment where people are just kind of sad all the time,
Hmm.
you need something to lift you up. And,
Yeah.
it's really cool to be able to come through on the other side and just kind of help mentor other people that have gone through it. I think that's healing for me and it's helpful to them. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. How long was it before you could go home?
so baby B actually came home in 60 days, so 2 months, which was excellent. Usually they tell you most babies go home around their due date if there's no major complications. So
Hmm.
she came home like weeks ahead of what she was supposed to. She was our little rock star. Now, baby A took a lot longer. Feed, like being able to feed, you wouldn't think you have to teach someone how to eat. But babies born that
Yeah.
early do not know how to breathe,
Hmm.
hand stuck on a bottle, or, get those muscles going
Hmm.
together. Their brain just does not know how to make that connection. And so
Yeah.
a lot of times they either aspirate and they choke on the milk or
Mm.
they just stop breathing. And
Yeah.
a lot of times she would just stop breathing, which is terrifying. Um,
I
so
bet.
she took 3 more weeks, so 78 days she was out.
Wow. That's a really long time.
Well, and so one thing that they did not mention was sometimes babies, twins, multiples, don't always come home at the same time. So I was just kind of expecting to take them home, and then right towards the end, when my first child was coming home, they're like, "Oh, she's probably going to come home by herself," and that to me was worse than leaving both of them in the hospital. Because
Mm.
at least before they had each other in the room, and I was like, they got each other. They're good. They're gonna
Yeah.
take care of each other. And so to take one home, I was like, this is our favorite baby. We're gonna take this one home. It felt so wrong.
Mm.
It just was wrong to take them away like that.
Yeah, I can still hear it in your voice. I can hear the emotions of doing that. That must have been really hard. Yeah, all these unexpected twists and turns. And then once you did finally get them both home, it doesn't just end when you go home. There's still a lot of things that you're doing that parents that don't have kids in the NICU don't have to do, right?
Right. And that's another reason that I've just been advocating for the NICU community because a lot of parents or just people in general think, oh, you're out of the hospital, things are fine, you're good. And it's like, well, not exactly. I have to go to specialist appointments and the
Mm-hmm.
audiologist and physical therapy. And then you got to go to the doctor every week. And it's just like that first year is never ending. And then it slowly those appointments slowly start getting farther and farther apart, and your baby's immune system slowly starts getting better. I mean, we did not leave the house for like 4 months once we finally got home, because
Wow.
outside of going to our doctor's appointments, they're like, there are germs out there, and they're too big for your kids. And
Yeah.
so I remember going to the to Walmart for the first time with the girls in a stroller. I had them covered, and I had these cute little signs made for their stroller tags that said, "Please don't touch. Your germs are too big for me." And there's still people that like they walk up to you and they lift it up. Like, I don't know you. You're a complete stranger. And they lift it up and they're like, oh, there's a baby in there. And you're like, please don't breathe on my kid. Like, I know you
Wow.
have the best intentions, but a little cold could turn into a life threatening situation very quickly, just because their immune systems aren't great.
Yeah.
And that's still like they started kindergarten last year. They're in first grade now. And the first part of the year is really hard because
Yeah.
we get sick every
Yeah.
time we're around anybody that's got a lot of germs. We just get sick, and we just got to take a few months to rebuild that immune system and keep going.
It's just funny how people do just do that. I remember during COVID, I'm caring for my parents. People are wearing masks. I'm only going out to get food and things from the pharmacy. I'm wiping everything down. I'm going to all these great lengths. I bought a second refrigerator freezer so I could go less often. Like I had my son come with me, so he's the one bagging up the stuff.
Right.
We did all these things, and then people come over and like move your cart and touch the handle, and I'm like, what are you doing?
No, 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 don't do that.
I mean,
And coming
I
from
carried.
someone who works in the dental field and I have to take like a infectious control class like every 2 years. And so,
Mhm.
you learn like germs are literally everywhere. They're on everything,
Yeah.
which, it's, you can't have a completely sterile environment. And so just seeing people touch stuff, I'm like, please don't touch that. And then they touch their face, and then they touch this, and you're like, no, everything's dirty.
Yeah,
So
it's
you just have to roll with it.
yeah, but I mean, I just remember wishing I kind of had a sign, but you're right. It probably wouldn't have made a difference. Like, people, most people cannot think beyond themselves.
Right.
And so a lot of people were just complying to masks because it was a mandate. It wasn't that they believed that they were really protecting anybody else. And it's been 3.5 years. Mom and Dad never got COVID.
That's
They actually
amazing.
haven't ever gotten sick in this time.
That's
So
amazing. Look at
I
you.
know, I know. So that's 100% God. But we did really try to have protocols in place and really tried hard. I couldn't hug other members of my family for the first year and a half.
Right.
There are a lot of things to it, but my job was to try to keep them well, so I can understand kind of conversely from the end of the spectrum of life.
Right, right.
um,
And it's hard too being in the South, like allergies are so bad where we live.
mhm.
And so, people would sneeze and I'm like, oh, you need to leave.
Ye-
Like, my mom's like, oh, it's fine, it's just allergies. I'm like, is it just allergies? My mom's like, you're being crazy. I'm like, maybe I am, or maybe I'm not. So, I mean, and I love my mom. I trust my mom. Like, I think she would do anything for these babies, and she would not want to put their life in jeopardy. But like, that was,
yeah,
you were constantly on alert, and you're always like, what do I need to do to make this the perfect environment for my kid? And it's just unrealistic. Like, you can't
yeah,
do it. It's stressful, and so people don't really think about all of those things when a preemie comes home. They're just like, they're fine, and having to remind them, like, well, actually, we're like a year and a half in, and we're still having doctor's
yeah,
appointments for different things. So it's
yeah.
a reality check for sure.
I can only imagine, I still have people that don't understand like why my parents aren't going to church, why my parents
Right.
aren't going out to restaurants. I'm like, guys, they're 93 and almost 90,
Yeah.
they've decided this is where they want to be, and we're trying to just allow them to have the healthiest, safest. Of course we have family over, but I don't bring friends over to the house. And we've learned that this is what this season is about. And
Right.
if anybody's going to bring something, at least if it was family, then they've seen their family. And that's just where we're at. I I I can't believe that your next pregnancy, so you ended up having a son as well. Can you tell us a little bit what was his birth like?
Yes, so we got pregnant with my son, and I was so thankful. We did not know it was my son until way months in. I liked the surprise. My husband was dying on the inside, not knowing with my girls. So as a Christmas present, I'm like, you get to find out the gender for Christmas. So that was his Christmas present that year.
Oh, I love that.
It was such a cool way to do it too. But we found that it was a boy before we actually had him. But I was scared the whole time. They don't tell you about, after having a premature child that your next pregnancy, you're kind of on pins and needles the whole time. Like, am I making the right decisions? Am I eating the right foods? Am I overdoing it when I try to go for a walk? You don't want to mess anything up because you don't want to relive all of that again. So I had my bag packed at 20 weeks, just in case. I'm like, we're ready. I
Yeah,
got this.
yeah.
So thankfully, he was a big boy. He made it to 37 weeks, and my water broke in the middle of the night, and so thankfully my mother-in-law lives across the street, and so we called her at 1 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hey, can you come watch the girls?" And so we went to the hospital. Um, and I had a scheduled C-section for him after our emergency C-section. It was just easier that way, and so we were just kind of waiting in triage until the team showed up to be able to get into the emergency room. And things once again went south very quickly. We were laughing and joking, and all of a sudden it wasn't funny anymore. Come to find out, I have precipitous labor, which means I labor very quickly. So I
Mm-hmm.
went from like 1 to 2 centimeters dilated to fully dilated within minutes, which
Wow.
I can tell you is very painful. So baby was ready to come, and so we did not get our C-section. He ended up being a VBAC, so he was born the other way, and he he welcomed himself into the world, and it was another traumatic birth where the nurses were screaming at each other and they were trying to get a nurse anesthetist in before we had the baby, so it wasn't so bad. I mean, it was just crazy.
Mm.
The next day, I had all the nurses come in. They're like, "Oh, you were that mom," and I said, "Great." No one wants to be the one that everyone in the hospital is talking about, but that was us. So I was very thankful to get to hold him right after he was born.
Mm-hmm.
I got my special moment with him. And then they took him and said, "We're going to run a couple tests real quick. He'll be back soon." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I just kind of was like, no deal, no big deal. I did it right this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, "Well, we're going to move you into your patient room." And I said, "Where's my son?" And they said, "Well, oh, he went down to the NICU." And I said, "What's that?" I was like, "No,
Oh,
no, 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 no. Like, we did not mess this one up." And they're like, "No, he went to the NICU." And I said, "Why didn't anybody come tell me?"
yeah.
Um, and obviously they don't put previous NICU mom on the chart, but I wish they would, because
Yeah.
that all those old feelings came right back, and you smell the smells, and it all those feelings were there, and it is awful. So I once again sat in my room hearing the babies down the hall crying without my kid in my room, having a little pity party to myself,
Mm.
saying, "What did I do wrong? How did I mess this up?" And
Wow.
it was awful. It was not a good day.
It sounds like it. And honestly, you just said they don't put previous NICU mom on the chart. They should.
They
I mean,
should.
I'm just, that's a mental health awareness thing. It's part of your well-being. It did spur on all of these familiar difficult thoughts and feelings and anxieties. And as a mom of somebody who is a psychotherapist, who's married to a psychotherapist, like we talk a lot about mental health and well-being, and like that is something that maybe out of this talk that like you could maybe advocate for.
Right. I mean, there are some hospitals now that are, I think, starting to adopt those plans. I think they're also trying to separate moms that have babies versus moms that don't have babies. Maybe put them a
Mm-hmm.
little farther down the hallway so they don't hear all those babies crying without theirs. I
Yeah.
think there is, some action being done. This was a different hospital. I did not have both of them at the same place because we
Mm-hmm.
ended up moving to a different state. And my
Yeah.
provider knew about it, but the whole team in there didn't know. And I definitely think having that you know displayed somewhere at the top of your chart for when you go in, like an alert that pops up, they go, oh, okay, maybe we need to have a different conversation with this mom.
Seriously, I
Yeah,
mean, if you're allergic to something, it's on your chart.
right.
I do think that would be something good for them to do. Now, you ended up writing a book based on a poem that you wrote when you got home from the NICU. After you turned it into the book, you did so because you had this desire. You wanted to kind of give back and bring awareness to NICU situations. So
Right.
when you first came on the podcast, that hadn't released yet, and now it's been
Right.
out for what, 2 years? Has it been
Yeah,
2 years? Yeah,
it's almost 2 years
yeah,
now.
yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So
Everything
tell, I
I
know,
know.
yay, congratulations. So tell me a little bit about how that happened and kind of what came to be from the book.
Sure. So, I'm not a really, I don't consider myself a writer. I don't journal. I don't go around writing poetry. And it was so strange. It was like the first month that we had our girls home. I had just finished pumping. I just finished feeding them. And I was like, I have got to write this down. And I grabbed a notebook and I just wrote this poem down. And I thought that was weird. And so I just stuck it, in my nightstand. And it sat there for 2 years until my son was born. And my husband was like, after everything that we've gone through, we really just need to find a way to give back. Like giving money to the March of Dimes is great, but
Hmm.
it doesn't feel proactive enough for us. And so he's like, maybe we could write a book or something. I said, well, how funny you say that because I wrote this poem a long time ago. And he's like, you what? And I was like, I know, it's weird. And so he read it. He's like, this is actually really good. And he's my biggest critic. So if he said it was good, I believed him. And so he's like, let's do it. Like, let's make it into a book. And I said, all right. So, you research how to do all of it. And it was so cool. We found our awesome illustrator who you've had on, Andrea
Hmm.
Brazier, and she's a rock star, but she took a lot of our personal NICU photos and made them into illustrations, and
Hmm.
it just came out so cool. And so we published it on World Prematurity Day, which is in November. And ever since then, it has just been so cool to read these reviews. Like this really helped us, you know,
Hmm.
when our babies were in there, or my baby was premature, and I love that they can go back now and see what that was like for them because
Yeah.
it's not like you could take them into the hospital and show them all the awful things. That's terrifying. So this was like a gentle way to show
Yeah.
what that experience was like. And I even had a provider tell me that she used the book to show her daughters what her daddy did for a living. And I was like, it's just so cool. I had our photographer who took the newborn pictures for our kids. Her husband was in medical school. And so
Hmm.
she bought a copy and her daughter read it, and now her daughter wants to be a NICU nurse. I mean, it's just little ripple effects
Wow.
afterwards that I just hear about in retrospect, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. I mean, what a cool thing to be able to inspire people or just kind of help them be able to cope with their own process.
Yeah, it really is. It's like I was saying earlier, if you feel like God's given you something to do, get up and do it, even if you don't
Right.
know how. God does, and he has a plan for it. And you're never going to be able to figure out what that is ahead of time, but you can look back and see what he's done with it. And it's beautiful to be used by God.
I agree. And so we also had this really cool program when our girls were in the NICU called Beads of Courage. And so they basically give you a bead for, an admission, or you got a needle stick, or you had to have surgery, or you got a blood transfusion. They would give you a bead for each step of the way. So by the time you graduated, you had this long, tangible medical history. And so we wanted to incorporate that into our book. So we reached out to them, and they allowed us to do it. And so it's just a cool way to help kind of share their nonprofit, to help other people be able to cope with their experience as well.
Yes, definitely. And we can put a link to them in the show notes, along with a link to your books, as well as social media ways for people to follow you, because I'm sure you're going to continue to do awesome things. You also started doing a Reading Through the NICU series. What's that?
Yes, so I wanted to be able to give back to our local NICUs. And so we just kind of started advocating for reading, because it helped us so much. And so I had made friends with a lot of indie authors that were kind of on their learning how to create a book and publish a book journey. And so I reached out to them and said, hey, I kind of want to do this readathon, and I thought it'd be really cool to do with our NICUs to help kind of get the message out there to read. And so many of them were willing to donate like an ebook, or a lot of them donated like a copy or two of their books. And we were able to have a successful readathon. We got parents reading, we had prizes, we had games, and we kind of built up like a NICU library for a few of them.
So cool.
It is so cool. And I was like, what a weird thing. I never in a million years would have imagined doing this. And so now we just kind of like help highlight other people, who have written really cool stories, and help share that with people to help encourage them. I mean, even if your child wasn't in the NICU, like early literacy and just reading as a family is so cool. It's something, we started at birth, and every night still, it's our favorite time to just come together, sit on the bed, and we all just read a story together, and we pray and go to sleep. I mean, that's like our bedtime routine. And so I think it's great bonding for us, and I just want to share that with other people. And so it's just been really cool to be able to give back in that capacity and encourage others to do it as well. So we're prepping for our next readathon in September. September is NICU Awareness Month, and so we're doing it again. And actually, we just kind of talked with a nonprofit called Babies with Books, and so they serve, I think it's like 140 hospitals out west. Since they had their program in place, I said, let's work smarter, not harder. Let's come together. And so I've been getting signups for other families who have written NICU themed books, and we're going to do some story times on Instagram Live. And awesome. I've got other indie authors that have offered to donate either physical books or ebooks. And so it's really cool to see it all come together.
I love collaboration. I think is always such a cool thing, where you link arms with people and do things together. And I always say that, we add and subtract, but God multiplies. So he takes an effort and he multiplies it. Now, speaking of books, so you have a new book that's going to be coming out, and we talked about doing a giveaway, and whether it's the new book is out and we do that one, or whether we do your first book, we will definitely do a giveaway. Can you tell us about the new book?
Yes, so the new book's called One Step Behind, and I had randomly wrote down another poem. Like, I swear this is not my doing. I really think this is God's will, so we are just rolling with it. So, I just wrote down this other poem while watching my son trying to keep up with his sisters. And so the whole point of the book is just to help celebrate the last baby, because after our
Mm-hmm.
second terrible birthing experience, we kind of made the decision that we are done. We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to go through that for them or for us again. And so, all those special milestones were just a little bit different after that. You look at them from a different perspective. You're like, oh, this is the first step that he's taking, but this is the last time I get to watch someone take their first steps. And so the whole book is just to help celebrate, accepting the special moments with that last baby and to watch their special bonds between siblings.
I love that. And that is definitely going to be relatable for so many people. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you again, and I did this the first time we talked, like what advice would you offer someone who's going through their own NICU journey?
I would say, just know that you're not alone and to take one day at a time. Believe in the power of prayer and read all of the books and, just don't be afraid to, take a break and get some fresh air and go take a shower and have a hot meal, because you kind of go on autopilot. Like, I have to take care of baby. I have to take care of baby. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
remember to refill your own cup before you're able to pour out into others, and just kind of take a moment to just, get back that a little bit of normalcy to your life.
Yeah.
And just to rejoice in every victory, I think is very important. Even if it's
Mm-hmm.
a small milestone that you're hitting, I really think it's worth celebrating.
Yeah, I think that's very wise advice. Kind of reminds me of the beads you were talking about, right? Like every little thing, kind of stringing them together and being thankful and being aware of the good things.
Yes, absolutely. Like, it's just these precious moments that we have with these kids. Like, they, in the moment, you're like, oh, they did that one. They said "mommy" for the first time, which, in the big picture, you're like, that's kind of not that big deal, but it's such a special moment.
Hmm.
And I really think just being present in that moment and enjoying it and just really capturing it is just so important.
Absolutely. And, you know, we probably, we this is our second podcast time together, and we probably could keep on talking for hours because I just didn't really enjoy talking with you. I think that you take such a positive look at what you've been through, and just that real heart to pour back is so amazing. But I am going to ask only one more question. And it's my favorite question. I don't remember how you answered before. I don't know if you do, but if you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Uh, I would say to slow down for sure. I think that's a common theme in my entire life. Just remember, slow down, Sarah. I was like, okay. But the other piece is, just to trust God's plan. Like,
Mm,
I would have never imagined, you know, having these babies, going through all of this, writing a book, sharing my story. Like, that's a very personal story. I don't
yeah.
know a whole lot of people that just go around talking about their terrible birth all day long. And, it's not something I imagine doing. I personally don't like talking about myself. Doing podcasts and interviews and things, I think is just such a special way to get that message out there. I had majored in public health and health promotion and behavior for my first degree, and I never would have imagined using that education in this
Hmm.
capacity. So
Yeah.
just realizing that, God's plan is just way better than anything that I could have imagined. And having all of these tiny little things finally start coming together and piecing this puzzle together is it's just so cool. So trusting in his plan, is it's just a great reminder. For all of those of you who are listening, just remember his plan is better. Just give it up and listen.
Amen. I'm also very good advice. I think that there is this necessary practice that we don't do much in our fast-paced world, and this podcast is part of doing it, of looking back, of remembering. In the Bible they had Ebenezer stones. Maybe it's not that, it's something else, some other way that we take note of what God has done, and in doing that we can trust what he's going to do. And everybody, Jesus promised us an abundant life. Being a Christian is an abundant, wonderful, joy-filled, surprise-filled life. And yes, there are difficult things, but he's with us in those things. And I can't explain it. If I tried to explain it to old me who didn't know Jesus, I might not have believed it. But I know that I'm out there living it, and I see you doing that too. People see it in your life.
It's just so cool. It's so cool to see it all come together. It's really cool to watch other people. I mean, you hear like you interview so many inspirational people, and I'm sure they sit back and they're like, my story probably doesn't matter. And then you hear them on your podcast and in stories and in books, and you're like, God's just awesome. I mean, you can't do it without him. You really can't.
He is, and every story he writes is so unique and it's so good. And my favorite people are the people that don't think they have a story, and in the process of their pre-recording call and coming up with questions and just talking with them and getting to know them, God reveals the story, and then they're able to be like, wait a minute, I do have a story. They're able to see. And so I think it's just a beautiful thing. God's always relational in everything. And in that same way, he had me share that didn't seem like it went with the talk at all. That very thing that he showed me this morning about Lazarus and the people around you being part of his plan in coming fully to this new life. I think your whole NICU journey is very much appropriate with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go downstairs and make a song request to my little preemie with that as in the story. You're gonna be singing that all day long. But I mean, it's just so cool to see how far we've come. I think it's so important, especially for parents of preemies, or whatever NICU experience you might or might not have gone through, or even if you weren't in the NICU. Like, just think about where you've come from and look at how far you've come. And if you're on the right track, I think you'll know it. If you're not on the right track, I think you'll know it. It's very cool. It's just so cool to see how God works in people's lives.
It is. And you really have to look from the right perspective, because sometimes people are like in the middle and they haven't gotten like where they're trying to go yet, but you also are the same distance from like where you came from. And I think it's so important. Just keep going. And you might not do everything exactly right, but God is so gracious and he uses even that stuff. And
I'm so glad to be in the middle with you, Amanda.
Me too. I'm so grateful for friends like you that I have made in this journey. And someday, when this season of caregiving is over, I hope to meet you in person and get a big old hug.
Yes, we're going to make it happen.
Okay, awesome. Well, listen, I am so grateful for you and for your story. Thank you for sharing again, Sarah. And I hope you have an amazing day.
Well, thank you. And you too, Amanda. Big hugs.
Big hugs back.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing. One thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.